Hey everyone, it's David. Today I'd like to share with you my final project video presentation. For my final project, I drew an image of a robin in a glass jar, standing in a field of grass. Throughout the entire semester, I've wanted to make a picture of a bird for one of my projects, especially a raven, but I couldn't. I didn't know how, and I thought it would take too much of my time and it'd be too complicated. So, for this project I decided I'd do a different bird, one that might be easier to make. That's why I went with a robin. I'm not really sure where I got the idea for a glass jar, or why I was going to put my bird in a glass jar, but I think it turned out well enough. Well, what do I think worked well? I think the bird turned out really well. Considering that I've never tried to draw a bird before, especially a robin, I think the end result is incredible. The eye and the beak were some of the most fun parts to make, especially when blending the colors. You can't see it very well because he's in the jar, but he's got lots of little feathers on his body. Those were a pain to draw, if I'm being truthful. I can see why people are always trying to make brushes to do things, but things like drawing a bunch of straight lines in a row will always give you a better result than anything else. I didn't think I'd be able to apply the concepts I'd learned in a lesson about transparent objects, and I wasn't sure I'd be able to get all the colors right to make it actually look like glass. But I think it looks great. The only thing I'm not happy about within the image is the sky I've created. It used to be one solid color before I put some variegation in it, which definitely helped with how bland it was. But that didn't cut it for me. I didn't like it. I really wanted to put something like a tree or a flower or a house or a fence post or anything in the background, but I just couldn't figure out what to do, so I didn't add anything. I did have a large tree root and tree base stretching across the background at one point, but like everything else I tried, I thought it detracted too much from the focus of the photo, which was the bird in the jar. The research I did for this project was more than I had anticipated for when I started the thing. First I had to look up what a robin looked like so I could attempt to draw one, and what pose to have him in. The first thing I tried to use was a blurry photograph of a robin in a nest, but the photo was taken with a phone and the bird was too far away and too out of focus for it to give me any idea of the bird's details. The bird was also standing in a nest and not on a flat surface, so I didn't have a point of reference for the bird's feet before I looked them up. I spent a lot of time looking through pictures of robins to get the details right, and I eventually found a few different angles of the bird that I could use to create my bird. After that, research-wise, I was pretty well off. Well, that's a lie. The jar. In retrospect, what I did for the jar was probably not the best thing I could have done, given the circumstances. I'm not really the greatest at drawing yet, so trying to invent a whole new shape from scratch isn't really the smartest idea for somebody who's not very skilled. Since I had such a uniquely shaped jar in mind, I had to look up jars to see what I could create. I couldn't find anything that looked like what I had in mind either. Eventually I came across a milk can and I realized that was what was exactly I was thinking of. So the bird isn't really in a glass jar, but more of a glass milk can thing. I also had to research other glass containers to see what they actually looked like, so I could apply shadows and highlights and things like that to my imaginary jar. I tried to use as many techniques as possible when I was doing this project. Well, that's what I'd like to say. It just so happens I was able to use a whole bunch while I was working on what I was doing. For example, Gaussian blur on the shadow under the bird in the jar. A few filters on top of the bird and the jar to make them look more glass-like. Blending modes, effects, using shortcuts for tools and presets, using the magic wand, etc. I was surprised at how much faster I could do these things compared to the beginning of the class, and how much more I knew. Stuff I wouldn't have even considered doing if I hadn't taken this course. For example, when I was making the bird's body, I picked out the right colors and effortlessly blended them using the mixer brush and the smudge tool. I knew how to make the glass seem see-through by putting shadows and highlights and glints on it. I knew to use distortion on the bird to make it seem like it was exactly in a jar. Also, as I'm saying this, I'm remembering that I forgot to put distortion on the glass in the back, the grass in the back of the glass. But it's fine. It is what it is. Anyway, I'm really glad I got the opportunity to take this course with everyone and see all of your amazing creations. Here's to hoping I see you all around someday. Thanks for watching.